can. So, Lisa, I don't know if you're having some microphone issues. It seems like maybe if you feel comfortable, type in the chat, great. If not, you know, no worries, not a big deal. Jen, are you an artist as well?
Yes, I do watercolor and oil, but also a lot of photography. My dad just passed last year, and so before that, I really had gotten back into my photography more, so I could spend time with him instead of being out in the studio out back for hours at a time. And but now I'm back with my watercolor and oil, and I just enjoy it so much.
Nice, wonderful.
But I'm terrible.
Is that
I'm
Jennifer
terrible
Carter
at,
that's on there?
yes.
Jen Carter, right? Yes, hi Jen. And she's exhibited at the Art Center as well.
Nice.
I'm terrible at managing or marketing myself. I do marketing. I produce ads for people. I'm very good at doing it for other people, but not myself. So I need to find time for the presentation to kind of get me going.
Yeah, I think we all struggle with promoting ourselves. Might be something to do with the artistic temperament. Maria, are you able to let us know anything about what you do?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Hi. I am in transition with my work. I was a massage therapist, energy worker for a long time. I cannot do that anymore. And I wanted to get back to my art, and I have started doing that. But I have a very hard time promoting myself and putting myself out there. And right now I am working with visibility issues. So judgments of others, judging my work, and feeling comfortable about that. And yeah, this is why I'm here. I want to expand my horizons, and I want to feel a little bit more comfortable, get some ideas of how I can do this, promote myself, be more visible. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, it's good to know where everyone's coming from, because this is a really wide topic, and there's lots of different ways into it. So I like to try to know who is in the room so I can, you know, be as helpful as possible.
Thank you.
So yeah, and if anyone else wants to share anything, like I said, the chat is always a great place to do that. I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint. Helps me stay focused. Lets me include images, fun stuff like that. And we are going to be sharing this with everyone after the talk tonight. So if there's anything in here that you wanted to jot down and couldn't, you will get a copy. And there's also embedded links in here too that you can just click through. Yeah, so we're going to talk about professional practices. I'm going to touch on a little bit of the stuff that from the other two classes, but I'll try to keep that really minimal, since you've already spent time talking about marketing and branding, as well as selling on Etsy. So this talk is a little bit more of an overview. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So for tonight, we're going to talk about showing up and showing off, and kind of the importance of both and the difference of the two. We're going to talk about some tools to connect to your audience, where to find opportunities, and then last but certainly not least, asking for help and what sort of important role that could play in success. As Rena mentioned, my day job, I'm an artist as well. I also paint in watercolor as well as other things. I've kind of gone off into the graphic novel Rabbit Hole recently. But my day job is I am the gallery director at Salisbury University, and then I also teach classes there, one of which has been professional practices. And this is one of the images I show to a lot of my students in this class, because I think it's a really great visual description of what success certainly in art is like, right? It's an iceberg. The majority of the work, the majority of the pain and the stress are all the things that we don't see. So when we look at other peers in the world having the successes that we would like to have, it looks so easy, right? You know, it seems effortless, but you know, for certain, behind all of that, beneath all of that success is sort of the same struggles, right? Two folks tonight already mentioned the whole difficulty with getting yourself out there. And, you know, from my experience, I've been doing this for 15 plus years. It never goes away. It never really gets much easier. Right. A lot of us sort of gravitate towards the visual arts, especially that drawing and painting that I heard mentioned a lot. A lot of us who end up in that space are ending up there because we're not necessarily comfortable being on stage in a performance like that. So, you know, that adds to the difficulty. But I like to share this image to just remind everybody, remind myself as well, right? That, you know, we're all sort of struggling with this, and all that effort is actually worth it. Lots of rejection, right? There we go. So showing up and showing off. The main thing that I want to share with you about this idea is that we tend to think about the people who buy and appreciate our art as our audience, right? Which is true to some extent. You're not going to know personally every single person that has a relationship with your artwork, either buys it or sees it somewhere. But the majority of your success, of your support financially, of your support in terms of exhibitions, is going to come from the community that you have, not so much the audience, right? So I like to kind of frame it in this way, because I think both aspects are really important. So showing up, that means being present where the art that you want to be considered amongst is being shown, right? And I think most of the people in this virtual room tonight are probably already doing that. It's certainly with the OC Art League, right? You showed up tonight, which is great. Support fellow artists and other creative people. You know, people showing up for you often means you showing up for them as well. So that's an important part of it. And this support isn't just sort of like, you know, networking and getting to know those people so you can get opportunities. I think it really does need to happen from a more genuine place, right? Find the artists that you want to be a part of, right? And show up for them so they'll show up for you. Collaborate and trade, right? So sometimes successes aren't just some random collector buying your work, right? But opportunities that come because you worked on a project with someone else. I'll say when I'm curating, a lot of times I prefer group exhibitions. And the reason why is because the reach seems to be that much greater because the audience of all of the artists involved come together and sort of get shared with the other artists that they might not have known. Whereas, you know, I think a lot of artists, we sort of yearn for the solo show. It's nice to have all that space to be the center of the stage on one hand, but it can also be a little lonely, and maybe the turnout isn't quite as great. And then in terms of, you know, for those of you who are thinking about this from a more practical financial perspective, you know, we often think about the dollar signs, like the money that we need to pay our bills and do all those things. But sometimes some of those needs can be met without there being dollar bills involved, right? So what can you trade with people that you know? for services, right? Like perhaps you need to get some really great photographs of your work and you don't photograph things, but maybe your friend who's a photographer does. And so you can somehow trade some labor there, and then not have to pay a professional to photograph your work, for example. You know, and doing all this in a meaningful way, right? I think we think about business and professional things as really not personal, but it couldn't be any less personal, right? Right? We're, especially with artists, this is the stuff that we make that we really are thoroughly attached to. So, you know, it's meaningful for you and meaningful for others as well. And then I think last, but certainly not least, is whatever form of showing up you do, try to be authentic about it, right? Like there might be the sort of ideal way to go out and be a, like a golden retriever in the world, right? A golden retriever, one of those people that's like got all that energy and friendliness and super ready to meet all the new people. You might not have that personality. You might be more of an introvert like I am. And it might be really hard for you to go to an art opening and talk to all these random people you don't know. So that's not going to work for you, even though you know, sort of practically speaking, that might be a great way to grow your network and get more connected. If it doesn't work for you personally, if that's not your personality style, then don't force yourself into that box. There's other ways to be successful. You will find your path for sure. It might just look a little different. So we've got the showing up part and then the showing off. And again, I really think these two things are hand in hand, because you can be the show upper. You can be there for everybody else, support all your fellow friends, and then never toot your own horn, and then never get the attention that you need and deserve, right? Or the support that you need. So it really is a balance, and you do have to sort of be a little bit self-critical as to, you know, am I doing too much of one or the other, right? So showing off, this means like, okay, you know, being an artist visible in the world. Unfortunately, we live in a, well, not unfortunately, I think the digital world is great. I say unfortunately because I know that as a group, we're trending on the older side, right? So some of us may be more or less comfortable in the digital space. But ultimately, it's created so many great opportunities. Like we can have this talk and we don't have to all be in the same room, and we can have our busy lives and do all those things. So anyways, I digress. But it really is these days, if you're going to have any sort of professional presence in the art world, you need some kind of digital identity, right? People have to be able to find you online. So that usually means a website or a link tree. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a little bit more depth in a second. But the gist of that is to be easy to contact and easy to purchase from, right? If we're trying to make money from our art, the art has to be out there for people to buy in some easy way. Social media is kind of a necessity. I think if you have a really strong core group, have the opportunity to see each other in person often through spaces like the Art League or other places, you can exist well without it. But if you want to grow that reach, if you're in the space in your career where you want to, again, really gain financially, presence online is pretty essential. So, you know, pick a social media platform that you like and, you know, be involved in it, right? It's the same thing as showing up to the art show, you know, you showing up online as well. And then of course, whatever platforms you choose, it's a great idea to do, like, I love searching YouTube. If you prefer reading things, you can just do a Google search, but finding out, okay, what are the things that make this platform tick, right? So for example, for a while, the algorithm on Instagram was prioritizing faces. So that's why for a while, and this is some years back, you saw a lot of people who were trying to share their work would like stick their face in there, because that would prompt the algorithm to show their image to more people. And these things are always changing, but they're always, that information is always really accessible online. So if you're on one of these platforms, I would just spend, you know, carve out some time for you to do a little research and just say, okay, what are the what are the best ways to get my stuff noticed on here? And again, I want to circle back to that, do the thing though that's sustainable for you, because ultimately if it's not in line with your lifestyle, then it's not going to work for you. Like for example, on most of these platforms, they say the more you post, the more successful you'll be, the more you'll show up in the searches and whatever pop up on people's timelines. That's never worked for me personally. I'm just not that kind of communicator. I wish I was. I would probably be more successful. But that just, was never a good fit for me. So there we go. So let's dig into the online portfolio thing just a little bit. Do most folks on here have some kind of website? No. Okay.
I do,
Several.
but we also have the artist directory on the Art League website.
Oh,
And
great.
if people don't have their own website, it's a great place to have your work shown, because so many people come on there to see, who belongs to the Art League, what artists are involved. So, if you don't have it, contact the Art League and they can get you on there if you remember. So.
That's great. That's a wonderful service that you guys provide. And if that's the only place your stuff is at, that's great. Anything is better than nothing. So the more you can do, the better. If you do go the website route, some things to keep in mind is to make sure that it's easy to navigate. Sometimes you can, if you ask a friend, maybe like, hey, will you go hang out on my website and tell me if anything is hard to get to or hard to understand. It's really great to have those proofreaders in your life, if you can find them. And then the other thing is adaptability to devices, right? So if you yourself have a computer and a tablet and a phone, or any combination of those, try it out on all of those devices, because some websites, depending on how you're doing it, might not be optimized for that. And you have to really think about there's the spectrum out there. People do really connect in all these different ways now. Some of the website builder options, assuming that we don't have any web coders here. I don't build my own. I used to build my own websites a million years ago, and then I prefer to pay to not have to deal with the code. So I use a Squarespace. It's a little bit more expensive. I'm probably not going to continue with that. But it is super easy to use and like really all-inclusive. Wix there is the cheapest, but also a really great option. I've heard lots of good things from people who have Wix sites. GoDaddy is another there, and ArtSpan is like another one yet. And what I thought was really interesting about ArtSpan was that they included a print-on-demand feature. So one of the ways I'm seeing, especially a lot of emerging artists make money these days with their work, is to take that original painting or watercolor, sometimes a photograph, and then be able to produce prints on that. And the nice thing about print on demand is that if someone's online and they're looking for a piece of artwork and they find it, they can go through the sale through this site, through your site, and then basically everything is handled without you having to lift a finger, right? And that's kind of a nice feature, to not have to, okay, now I have to make a print, or now I have to ship a print, right? So anyways, but let's say you don't have a website and you have a listing on the Art League, and maybe you have a Facebook page or you have an Instagram page or something like that. You have your art maybe in a couple different places, and of which is like a full-on portfolio site. Linktree is a really great option to give you a really short URL that can be stuck in any online, put it on a business card, you can stick it in your email signature, and that basically takes the viewer to a list of all these places where they can find you. The nice thing about it is it's free. You can also pay for even more, like, services and stuff, but to get this basic feature of kind of everything in one place so that you have one URL, one little line of, you know, because sometimes when we post our artwork elsewhere on these other sites, the path to get there, the URL might be really long, and it's hard to share that with people, especially if you're telling them. So we're trying to link it. So that's a great option. So one of the core pieces of professional practices for, especially for those of us making two-dimensional work, which it sounds like everybody here, is getting great images of your work. I guess that's true for 3D people too. I don't know why I was separating that. As you can see here in this image, this is sort of the classic best way to photograph a two-dimensional work. We've got the two studio lights with diffusers at about 45-degree angles from the artwork from either side, balancing out the light, avoiding any hot spots and glare. And then our nice fancy digital camera pointed directly across from the work, hanging on a white wall. Most people don't have this setup. This is awesome. I wish I had this setup, but I don't. So I wanted to share some ways to kind of replicate that same or similar effect without any fancy equipment, in case you don't have any. So one thing that you can do that's really great is use the sun. It's almost 100, I want to say this is 100% true, but I always get nervous saying that, like maybe I'm wrong, but more light is always better. So if you're worried about getting good images, or if you've had trouble in the past getting good images of certain artwork, it's probably a light issue. Best way to solve that, if you don't, again, have studio lights, take it outside and photograph it in, en plein air, right? Best to, as this diagram shows, find a shady side of the building, so the north side of a building, or any other shady spot. You don't want the direct sun. Again, that's going to cause glare potentially if you have any shiny parts of your work. But the shade works really well for even lighting. Or take it outside tonight in the apocalyptic smoky haze that we're living through, and would have the same effect. One thing to keep in mind, especially if you're photographing with a device like a phone or a tablet, is because of the way those lenses are, they can cause a lot of distortion. So that's what this diagram down here is showing us, is that and you'll notice this especially if you're trying to photograph like a painting that's a rectangular square. So it's supposed to have the straight sides and the straight top. If you get a little too close, if your distance, isn't quite right, it can create a bubble effect again, and we don't want to stretch our images like that and misrepresent them. This is a little hack for three-dimensional work. If anybody has any of that, I'll just quickly mention the things. So, and you can also take this setup outside, right? This is showing you inside. So one of the downsides of this, what's going on in this image is it's probably a little bit on the dark side, but what is nice about it is it's got this background. So if you take a piece of paper and you let it, you tape it up on the wall and then you run it down to a table and just let it gracefully fall, it'll create this illusion on your image that there's like this infinity background behind it. You can do that with white, gray, whatever neutral paper. And then again, to get that diffuse light, you can use a piece of foam core, whiteboard, whatever, and shoot your artificial light at it so that it then reflects onto your piece in this sort of more overall glow. So just some tips for photographs, because I can't stress enough how important a good image of your work is for selling anything online, for applying to shows, which is almost always digital now, right? We have to have those good images of our work to really let it shine. And hopefully you're not like me and you make things that are horribly difficult to photograph all the time. I'm really good at that. Oh, and the other thing I will say, if you are doing really small work and you have access to a decent scanner, I always pick the scanner over a photograph any day of the week. Again, your lighting is going to be more even. It's just, again, it doesn't work really well if you have shiny work. So this is a better tip for those of you doing watercolor and drawing and things like that. But yeah. So what are some tools for connecting, right? And building this community and this audience that we're talking about? I wanted to share this. This is from Artsy, I think. But this is just a little bit about market trends in 2023. And what this is showing us is really, it kind of surprised me a little bit. I sort of assumed that the collector age was a little bit on the higher end. I just assumed that, you know, more disposable income, the older you are. I guess maybe that isn't always true. But we really see a peak here in the 35 to 54 range. And why this is relevant does go back to kind of what I've been harking on so far, which is the importance of the digital presence. The majority of folks in this age range are going to spend a decent amount of time online. They're not going to be so, you know, in the TikTok realm as maybe the next generation lower, but they're certainly going to be spending a lot of their time on there. So that means as artists to be successful, you know, that's where we want to be too, where those collectors are. So let's talk a little bit more about social media. Are you guys on social media? By and large, nod of heads, helpful.
Yes.
Think of heads, yeah. No.
I
Okay.
am not.
Yeah,
Am not. Okay, all right.
a lot,
Well,
too much.
again,
Too much.
too much.
much.
It can be really addicting, and that's, you know, they design it that way. So yeah, you know, grain of salt, you have to do you have to do what's right for your life and what you're comfortable with. And, you know, it might not be for you at this time. But if it is, I just wanted to point out a couple of important things about that. Again, finding something that's sustainable for you, that again, an app that you like to use is the best possible solution, because it's not going to be a chore. It'll be something that you enjoy engaging with and getting involved in. But the other thing to do is to think about, okay, I make art and I do this thing, but maybe I also do something else. Like, you know, Bill mentioned the music thing. You know, I like to garden as well. Like, what are some of your other interests? Right? Because you might find great ways to connect with community that aren't just directly through the art that you're making that you want to share. It could be that you also connect with folks on one of these other topics that I'm sure is related to your artwork, because, you know, it's all you, right? It's all coming from the same place, right? And really that's what social media runs on, you know, beyond the paid for stuff. It really is communities of like-minded people sharing information. And I've got sort of the main ones that, in my experience, most artists use. There are other millions, right, of other social media platforms out there, and there might be another one that you found that you like, and, you know, so don't treat this list as the end all be all. And they aren't in necessarily any particular order, but Instagram is really the art world mainstay. And I think that became that way because they were the first one to really prioritize images and the kind of image scroll thing that's now pretty common in all of them. So a lot of artists migrated to Instagram really early. The big downside of Instagram is if you're trying to take people from that Instagram post to something else, it's really difficult, right? So Instagram, and that's to a degree true of all social media apps. Their goal is your attention and your time, right? So they're going to do everything they can to keep users in their environments. But some of them are a little bit more friendly to the external navigation than others, and Instagram is one of them. They do let you have a little link in your bio that you can kind of direct people to connect with you on your Etsy shop or whatever. Facebook has kind of become like this, you know, I called it familial clutter because, well, for a lot of us, I think we're connected to a lot of our families and friends and, you know, non-professional communities, which of course can be great communities for supporting our art. Nothing wrong with that. But there tends to be a lot of clutter on Facebook. There's a lot of noise. And so Facebook isn't necessarily a great way to have a lot of reach a lot of times because of all the noise. One of the ways I found people using Facebook that tends to work better is to get connected to certain Facebook groups. And again, you know, certain people, like I've found that certain people in my life are only there. You've probably found that too. Sometimes you have to be where your people are. TikTok is super fun. It's very addicting. The plus is it's all video. The downside is it's all video. So if you're someone who doesn't really want to share video content, which for a lot of us making two-dimensional artwork quietly by ourselves, that's probably not the best fit. But I have seen a lot of artists be successful on TikTok, make a name for themselves. And oftentimes this is with kind of a behind the scenes. So an artist might kind of share some candid film video of their studio, or maybe they record while they're making the work itself. People really love seeing kind of what we do as artists behind the scenes, so, you know, the process of. So if you're interested or on TikTok or really any video platform, those are great formats to use. YouTube is very similar in terms of it being all video. But we typically see more how-to videos, longer content. TikTok does have a time limit on it. It's built for shorter videos, like little clips, whereas YouTube, you can find whole movies on there. So it's a great place to connect if you feel like, oh, I think I might want to share some of my knowledge and share some how-to tips or something like that. Twitch is a platform that comes out of gaming, so it does skew on the younger side, and it's really best and kind of designed for live streaming, which means video that's happening right now, like what we're doing in the moment here today. So there aren't a ton of artists on Twitch. I've experimented with it myself, and I've found that there is kind of like a big hole there, right? I think there could be a lot of potential for growth if that was something that someone was interested in. And then last but not least, coming back to the more static image format, which I think is probably more on point for everyone today, is Pinterest. Pinterest has been around forever, but it's actually, and a lot of times with these social media companies, they sort of peak and then they start to die out. But Pinterest has actually gone up in recent years, even though it's one of the older platforms, both in terms of demographic and its age as a platform. And I think that's because it's one of the few where, again, it's really image heavy. So it's a great place for artists. And it is a place that lets you, as well as every other user, create these boards. And so you can sort of save images that are all kind of organized around a certain theme. Yeah. So last but not least, if you find yourself doing multiple social media platforms and you're finding it a bit overwhelming, one of the things that a lot of successful folks do is use a social media scheduler like Buffer, Later, Hootsuite, and Monday. Those are kind of like the main ones at the moment. I'm sure there'll be more in short order time or different ones. But the idea of these apps, if you will, is to allow you to kind of make content and then push it out to all these different platforms. Rather than, oh, I have to go onto Facebook and I have to do a post. Now I have to go to Instagram and make a post. And, you know, that can be a lot for some folks. So sometimes it's easier for them to just kind of do it all at once. And yeah. So I'm sure you guys talked a little bit about that stuff in branding and marketing, so I won't harp on that too much. I did want to share, this is my list. And again, I'm gonna, oh, I have a pen. That's me. Oh, maybe that's not me. Okay. Oh. So some places to sell online. I hear you all learned all about Etsy, so I won't mention that at all. You know that exists and probably know way more about that than I was planning to share anyways. But I wanted to go over a couple of options here. So, you know, the showing off part, we do need to get our work out there, and it's never easy. It's always hard. There's always lots of rejection. I feel your pain, but you know, we have to do it if we want our art to be seen. Artsy is one that is highly professional and competitive. It would probably be a great sort of 5 to 10 year goal for anybody. They are quite expensive as well, but I thought I'd put it on there as sort of like the top tier. But then we have other ones like Art Pal, Art Finder, Art Scene, which is just an app. These are all free. So doesn't require any investment on your part. Some of them are open, some of them are competitive. And by competitive, I just mean that you have to share work with them in advance of them saying you can sell work with them. And that's good and bad, right? You know, it's bad if they don't like your work and you don't get in. It can be good though, because it does make a smaller pool of artists. So if you do get in, you have potentially a better chance to make a sale. And, you know, right, not all of our sales are online. And I think the one thing about art that will probably be true forever is that we will always be an in-person game ultimately, right? You're making a physical object. Someone else is purchasing that physical object. Okay, there's digital art too, but anyways, for most of us here tonight, we're making physical things. And so that the places to sell are probably going to be in person as well as online. I think probably the most, you know, if you're trying to do this to make a living or make extra money, you know, the more places you can have your work, the better. If you can do both online and in person, but again, do what's sustainable for you. You know, you basically have 2 options in person. Well, 3, I guess there's art fairs, and you could set up on the street potentially and sell your work. But I'm thinking mostly of galleries because that's the main way that most artists make money. We have commercial versus nonprofit is the main distinction. So most of you, it sounds like, have experience with Ocean City Art League, maybe even selling your work before through them. So you're, I'm assuming, familiar with the nonprofit part. Tends to be a better percentage for the artist, again, because nonprofits are not in the business of making money, but in the business of supporting the community and their members. So there's some pluses there in terms of the less of a cut, but then we have the commercial galleries versus art dealers. And they take a bigger cut, but the plus is that they do much more to promote, sell, get your work out there, you know, because that's what they have to do to survive. So the best way to find the places in terms of physical spaces that you want to show your work and sell your work is to visit them, right? To become a member of that community, whatever that means, and try to build some relationships with the people that patronize and run that institution.
Could I just break in and make a comment on that?
Sure.
Just the Art League of Ocean City, I've just finally have time to really become a part of that community, and they are just so phenomenal. And Rena, it's just amazing. You're talking about, Liz, the publicity, what you get for being a member is so phenomenal. You know, all the artworks and all the classes, the photos, the advertisements, it's really wonderful. It's like, to me, it's a professional commercial gallery or dealer because they're so wonderful. My 2 cents.
Thanks. I'm glad you had a great experience. So thank you for letting us know. We are right now undergoing some strategic planning for the future, and we've sent out like a whole bunch of surveys about, you know, what we can do more for people, and so if you do see that come across on your emails, you know, make sure you we appreciate all feedback. So it's not easy. I know myself, if I didn't have Gallery One to sell my own artwork at, I don't have the time to go running around and you know, into different galleries and kind of pitching myself or pitching my artwork. And you know, so it's nice that if you don't have that time, you know, or to be able to have a place like the Art League to sell your work there. So.
Oh, for sure. And you know,
I barely have time to paint it. Never mind, never
Right.
mind sell it. So.
I would imagine too that maybe some of, what Jen's commenting on is that, Rena, since you're an artist, like you probably have led the Art League in a direction that is super supportive of artists, which, should be true of all nonprofit spaces, isn't always true of all nonprofit spaces. So it helps to have artists in places of power. But so in terms of getting your work seen in any type of physical gallery, it's almost always, I can think of one, I always think of like the one case where it's not, but almost always a competitive process. As you guys have probably experienced, there's juried shows, right, where there's a juror and they decide whether or not your art gets in. But there are those opportunities at commercial galleries too. So if you're thinking you might want to try to find a relationship with a commercial gallery so that you can expand your reach, keep an eye out for those. We'll talk about where to find that stuff in a moment. I wanted to mention artificial intelligence because everyone's talking about it, and it really is about to, I mean, it's already out there, but like it's going to change everything. I don't think that's an exaggeration. So I say that because I think the sooner we all sort of engage with it, the better. Not just because it's going to take over and we have to anyways, but because then we can be involved in the process of shaping this technology rather than just being handed to it by those who chose to engage. And it's a super powerful tool. Has anyone played around with either Bard or Chat GPT or any of the? Yeah, good. Cool. Yeah. It's fun, right?
It is. I use it to help me describe photographs when I list them online on my nice. on one of the places that I'm very successful. I'm surprised you didn't mention in your list. I used to be with Art Pal. I've sold 4 things there in 5 years. I'm currently, well, for the last 10 years, I've been with Fine Art America. They will give you an individual website for $35 a year without competition with the other 500,000 people there. I'm currently averaging 2 sales a week on an annual basis.
There you go. Nice. Yeah, there's so many. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I did meant to preface all of my lists with none of them are exhaustive. And it's, always good to take this as a starting place and, do more homework on your own. But yeah, so what Bill mentioned, one of the easiest things to use AI for is a free ghostwriter, basically. So if you have any issue with articulating your thoughts, describing your work, like Bill mentioned, this can be kind of hard for us, right? Like we're visual people usually that end up in these fine art fields. And so, writing may or may not be your strong suit. So you can sort of feed it images, you can feed it other things you've written that, half sentences that don't make any sense, and it'll make it all sound coherent and easy to follow. So it's a huge tool for that.
There's one caveat.
What?
You must proofread it and make sure it applies to what you're actually doing.
Yes, you cannot get away from, you cannot just take it full stop. It will also sometimes make up sources. So you guys aren't in the business of probably making any kind of academic papers, but that's a big problem that we've found at the university. They also, AI will generate images. And I think a lot of artists have been nervous about this because, that's what we do, right? Like, is this going to take our jobs? And I think very clearly it won't, because ultimately we're not the same, right? The stuff that the AI is going to create is never going to be the same as the thing you're creating. For one thing, you're creating it with your hands, right? With your eye. Like we have a different shell that we're within. So even if it gets smarter than us, it's still going to be limited by its container. But it can be a really great tool to collaborate with as an artist. So a lot of artists who are already in the digital space have kind of taken this on and used it sort of to enhance their work or generate reference images. So if you're someone that needs to make work based on, you're a representational painter or drawer in some way, and you need images to work from, it's a great place to find images that are going to always be sort of copyright free and available to use. You probably already use AI without realizing it, depending on how new your devices are. It's now sort of part of all of the software that we're using every day on our phones and devices. So, and I would just encourage you to, spend a little time getting to know it, because it is super powerful and it is super helpful. And a lot of things that because I found myself doing this, I would be struggling through something and then realize oh, there's this totally easy shortcut on my phone that I didn't realize, and I was making my life hard. So I just encourage you to not shy away from that, not be like me and be like, I don't want to learn anything. It's always a good idea. And also, if you do get into working with either ChatGPT or Bard, they're both free online, and you could just Google search them if you wanted to. And it's basically like a chat box that pops up, and you ask it questions and you talk to it like you would any other being on the planet, right? I'm always really nice. I know it's a computer, but I don't know, I don't want to turn on me. So I'm always polite, but the prompt writing, the things that you're telling it to do for you, getting it to do what you want can take a little bit of time. Sometimes, depending on how difficult it is, it can be a really quick, easy response. But if it's a little bit more of a complex problem, you might have to work with that language model a little bit, right? You might have to ask it for something and get something you don't really want, and then ask it again and, have a conversation. So again, time spent is to be expected there. And then there's a million things that AI is already doing to make everybody's work, professional lives easier. So I included this link here that has a list, as well as all of the ways to use it. So all right, how do I go back to my presentation? Sorry. Okay. All right, so where do we find these opportunities to get our work out there? First of all, some kind of overall notes about this. It's really, I have to remind myself of this. I'm telling you all the things that I haven't mastered necessarily, but I've found to be really helpful. You have zero chance of getting the things that you don't apply for, right? So you have to just keep applying. I know the rejection sucks. I know that it can be time consuming and hard, but you just have to keep doing it. And I found, doing this for a while, that if I get a 10% success rate, that's great. Now that might be a little demoralizing, but if you think about it, right, that 10% can add up over time, right? So once you do create a relationship, let's say one of those successes is a relationship with a gallery that's created, well, then you'll have that, maybe not forever, but you'll have that for a while, right? So the opportunities sort of grow on themselves as you put the effort in up front. Organization is super important. I'll get back to that in a moment. And it costs money to make money. So a lot of these things, there's some kind of money you're going to have to put up front. A lot of juried shows cost money, as most of us probably know. And, I think that's fair, right? We're asking these institutions to do things on our behalf, provide a service for us. So to support them with application fees seems fair. As you're sharing your work in any format, in any way, I would always err on the side of more information rather than less. I think as artists, we're so close to our work, we think everyone can maybe see the things that we see, but oftentimes that's not true. So the more information, the more photos, the more descriptive text you can add, the better. And then of course, with everything in life, once you send out that application, once you put the post out there, do your best to just kind of go do something else, not think about it. Let let the universe work its magic and bring you the good things. Because sometimes our obsessive worry can not be helpful. So when I have been applying to shows, which I don't do currently, which is a long story, but when I was actively applying to shows, this is my spreadsheet that I kept to keep me straight, right? Because if you start to really try to apply to multiple shows at the same time, it can get confusing. When are these deadlines? When have I committed my work to be where, right? As you start to get into juried shows, especially when they're physical and you have to send the work, you can double book yourself potentially, and you don't want to do that. So I found it really helpful to have an archive to kind of keep all that information straight. I was also keeping track of the costs that I spent. That's stuff you can deduct from your taxes if you are going to itemize. So that's another thing to think about and to keep track of. And I also wanted to keep track of it because I wanted to know, like, here's literally what I'm investing in my art, right? What does this really cost me to make? Because on the flip side, when you go to sell it, all of that cost is part of your cost of production, right? And so you always want to be charging enough that you're covering the things that it took to make that work and get that work out there. And then it also helped me track my success rate. As you can see, in 2012, I applied to 18 things and I got one of them. So it was not a great success rate that year, but I had another year the following year, and I think I had like a 20 or 30% success rate. So, it does fluctuate, and you just have to keep doing it. I think the most shows I ever applied to one year was 50, which is a bit much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't recommend. So you might be familiar with some of these sites, or you might not. Again, these are sites where you can find different opportunities for artists, calls for entry, and oops, crap. Sorry. Calls for entry and artcall.org are both free, and they have basically everything on their platform, which is great. Artist communities, these, as well as, I didn't organize these very well. Didn't take my own advice, sorry about that. Artist communities, that is supposed to say residencies that are in the US, and that's an error. So I will fix that. But that is the main site for all of the residency programs, primarily in the US. I think they are also working with some international ones now. It used to only be US. In case you're not familiar with what a residency is, so these are opportunities for you as an artist to go travel to some other place and make work for a period of time. So if you're an artist that likes to travel, or you're an artist that feels like, oh, I would really benefit from being around other artists who are also making work at the same time, residencies are a really great opportunity to have some devoted time to making work, again, to network, to meet other artists, sometimes to meet curators and gallery directors. Sometimes that's part of the residency program. So increasing that network in general. And then of course, the travel aspect, it's a great way to get that travel either completely paid for or at least partially subsidized, because a lot of residency programs, you might be able to stay for free, you might get free meals. It just depends. And there's like hundreds of them out there in any possible place you could think. So that's artist communities. And then there's also trans artists and resartists.org. They're both different residency websites. Those two focus primarily on international residencies. So, going overseas, but some great opportunities there. And then some of these other ones, Art Show, another listing site, the Art Guide, also free. Art Deadline is one of the oldest listing sites. They've been around since like 94. They do charge a subscription. It's $12. The baseline is $12 per year, up to $28, depending on your situation. And while that might seem high, especially compared to the ones that are free, I do recommend it still to this day. It's one that I've used in the past because it's everything. Like, they pride themselves on being the biggest clearinghouse of all the opportunities that are out there. So if you really are trying to get out there as much as you can and know everything that you could possibly apply for, exhibitions, income opportunities, grants, awards, you name it. That's a good one. And then last but not least, this artwork archive is, they have a free part of their website where they have opportunities that you can apply for free of charge, but they run their business on providing archival, like an archival platform, if you will. So that spreadsheet that I showed you, they have a much more complex and sophisticated version of that, where you can keep your artistic archive, which again, if you have lots of work in lots of different places and you need to keep it organized, that's a great service that they have. So last but not least, I wanted to talk briefly here at the end about asking for help. And this comes from a woman named Amanda Palmer. She wrote a book called The Art of Asking. She has a TED Talk too. They're both linked there if you want to. I do encourage you to go watch her TED Talk. It's really great. And it's, you know, it's always better to hear the stuff firsthand. But she has a really interesting perspective on what it means to be supported and have value as an artist. She's in the music industry, but, you know, I think we can, you know, relate, right? It's pretty similar in terms of the stuff that we all go through. So you can see, actually, this is a picture of her here in this bride outfit. So before she's now a famous enough musician, successful enough that she's just making music. So, but back in the day, before she was at that point, she made her money by being one of these live statues. You've probably seen them if you've traveled. You know, I see them a lot. I've seen them a lot in Europe, not so much in the States, but I think they're here too. You know, these people who are like frozen and pretend to be statues, and people give them money, right? And her version of doing it was to impersonate this bride character, and she would look people in the eye and kind of like very intensely make connection with them. And then if they responded, she would try to hand them a flower. Sometimes they would take it, sometimes they wouldn't. What was really interesting about this experience for her, she said, was that she realized that the most important thing about that transaction was the connection that she was able to make with people, even just from the simple act of looking each other in the eye and handing a flower and accepting a flower. And she realized the power that exists in this idea of giving, as well as, you know, asking for help. So she worked on tips exclusively. She said that ironically, it was a very stable, or I would say predictable income. So she got around the same amount of money on certain days every week. So she could actually, like, you know, plan her life and live. But again, the main part of this that she realized was that it was that direct human connection that really sparked the most, not only meaning, but value as well. And I think one of the things as artists, we can often feel, because we're making things that we like and we enjoy, right? Like we love painting and drawing and photographing and whatever we do, it's fun. And then now we're asking people to give us money for doing the thing that we had fun doing. Like sometimes it feels a little wrong or something, like, you know, we're asking for something that we don't deserve. But I think she makes a really good reminder that, like, no, people do value it, right? They're not going to put money towards something that they're not valuing. And there is always going to be naysayers out there. You know, she said people would yell at her occasionally and tell her to get a job. And, you know, I'm sure people have shouted that at artists too for centuries. But that this is a job, right? We are doing things that are of value, and it is work. Even if it's really enjoyable work, it's still work, right? It's still effort and time and expertise if you've been doing it for years and years and years, right? There is value there. And that value might not be to everyone on the planet, right? We're going to get those rejections. We're going to find people that don't really care for our work, but we will matter to someone. And her sort of moral of her story is that so she shares lots of stories in her talk and in her book, but one of them that is of note is, or why she kind of became famous, is because she had the largest crowdfunding project at the time, and this was like 2012, I think. But what this means is, okay, so she made a record with a record company, you know, the traditional old way of making money. She sold 25,000 copies and she was like, that's great, that's awesome. And the record company was like, no, thanks, that was terrible. That's not enough profit for us. Goodbye, you know, we're not interested in working with you anymore. But if you think about it, 25,000 people is a lot of people supporting your work, right? So she realized that instead of kind of using the traditional means, that she could potentially just, you know, there were 25,000 people that asked her for that bought her record. So, you know, what if she just asked them directly to support her next record rather than using the record company? So that's what she did. She went on, there's now lots of crowdfunding platforms, right? There's the digital interface that makes it easy to put the ask out there and to organize it. But anyway, she gets out there, she asked people to support her next album. She ended up getting 1.9 million, right, of support, monetary support for her next album from, I kid you not, 25,000 people, right? So without that middleman in there, right, she was able to actually get a way more support than was, you know, she probably ever thought of just by asking directly. And that's because, you know, she had already made this real, genuine, direct connection with an audience. And again, you know, we're talking about the performing arts, we're different. We're not performers, but we can build community and we can have those same support mechanisms. Especially when we remember that we are offering something of value and that is important. And I think this is a really, even though this, her book came out a while ago at this point, it's still a really important thing to remember because we live in this world now where everyone's a celebrity, right? Like, because of, I know some of you might not be on social media, but for those of you that are, know this, that like, there's plenty of, now, you know, they call them Instagram famous or whatever famous, Facebook famous, you know, everyone's a celebrity now. And in this world where there's so much noise and all these very loud voices, I've found that the up close, personal, face-to-face interactions are even more valuable now. They're even more meaningful. So the act of you showing up at the Art League or wherever for the art show is even more important. And I wanted to share that too, because for those of you who might not be seeing the digital side of it, you might not realize how important an act is that you're doing, that you've always done, right? You've always just shown up in person, but it's becoming even more so. So.
And I think COVID, you know, really has exacerbated that as well. We've kind of gotten into these little bubbles of isolation and just, you know, being there and being able to see people in person at an in-person event and appreciate the art in an in-person manner as opposed to an online kind of format, you know, means a lot more, especially because art used as such a tool of healing, you know, and then you create the art because you're trying to deal with emotions or, you know, trying to heal, but then to be able to show it in person is important.
Yeah, and I think for most of us, it's probably the thing, right? If we're making it, again, a physical object, we're intending for that to be seen in person, to experience in person. And
I had one person today in my art class, and it was from 10 to 3. And she said she was just painting all day long. And she said, do you realize, she said, I sat here all day and I was not in any pain because I was so involved in the art. And that is really something.
That's awesome.
That's great. That's great, Jerry. Jerry just came off teaching a 3-day workshop at the Art League. She was there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for doing her monthly watercolor workshop. So
nice.
So it's been a long day for you, a long few days. Also, you know, Liz, when you mentioned about juried shows briefly and rejection, and that's the one thing, because we are a community arts organization and we're there to support emerging artists and established artists, I personally, it pains me when people get so upset if they don't get into a juried show. And it's not a personal thing, you know, a lot of times it's just a matter of space. We have a jury show coming up and we have 165 entries that is about to get, you know, juried into the show. And we know that there is about room for 40 to 50 pieces, you know, so it doesn't necessarily mean your art is bad or you're bad, or it just means that, well, that particular show, you know, the way that the judge curated it, you know, they were looking for something. So I hate, like I said, I don't want people to get discouraged about your jury shows. They're great to have, and when you do get into them, it's great to put it on your, you know, CV that you were selected. But if you don't get into them, just keep trying. So
Yeah, you know, because this is ultimately a subjective game, right? Like art, a particular piece of artwork anywhere, anytime, even something that the world has decided is great enough to live forever in a museum, isn't liked by everybody.
Right.
So, you know, it's really about trying to find your people. And the best way to find your people is to be out there and to, you know, keep trying to be out there in order to connect with them in some way. And, you know, my final slide here is just, this is a drop in the bucket, right? This topic is so huge, and there's so much intricacy to it. Feel free to reach out if you have any other specific questions. And right now, if anyone has any specific questions, I'm happy to hang around and answer anything or discuss anything else. Like I said, we will be sharing this PDF with you, so you can have all those links if you would like any of them.
That's nice. This has been fascinating.
Mhm.
Oh,
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
You didn't mention LinkedIn. Do you use that as an artist?
Well, I do. I do. I am on LinkedIn, but I don't find it to be a terribly fruitful place to engage with either collectors or even other arts organizations and stuff. You know, if you're job searching specifically, it's kind of a must for that, but it seems to be more of a corporate space primarily. But again, like the hard thing about social media is that it's entirely personalized, right? So the stuff that you're seeing, the stuff that comes up on your timelines is always tailored to you and your activity and history on that app. So I could be having this experience because of the way I'm using it, right? So that's why I always try to say, like, if you're finding something that works or you want to try something because you like that app, then like by all means, there could be a way for it to work for you. But yeah,
I have had the same experience as you have, Elizabeth, with LinkedIn. It's all right for corporate stuff, job hunting, but for connecting with other artists, it just doesn't work well. I did take a picture of one of your slides. I don't know if you can see that there.
yeah,
And I shared that to social media with a hot link to the Ocean City Art League.
cool.
It went out to 24,000 people.
Mhm.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
have a Facebook page / Visit Ocean City, those 3 words together, that has 23,000 followers. And my personal page has about 1,500.
And how, so I'm assuming, so based on that number of followers, you've been on Facebook probably since like 10 years ago or so. Has it been a while?
At the beginning, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and I wanted to point that out because for those on in the room that might not be either on social media at all, or maybe just got on it recently, like it can be a little discouraging, right? There is this whole popularity contest kind of vibe to the social media space. But your growth will happen over time if you use the app. And when you're, you know, not that all growth is just organic and slow and over time, but to kind of be maybe hopefully heartened by knowing that there will be growth. It just takes time sometimes.
It takes a while. It takes the interaction. You can do the personal thing online that you were talking about. Answer questions. If you post a picture and somebody says, I really like that, always respond with a thank you.
Right. Yes, I do the same thing.
And I'm responding with a thank you. I've got to run, but thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Oh,
Great.
good. I'm glad you liked it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Liz. I think it's great to have this conversation, and we really appreciate you, bringing your expertise. And I just encourage everybody to keep at it. And I keep thinking about you were saying about the rejection part of it, that don't let other people define who you are and what you want to say with your art. So.
Yeah, you'll find your people. Like they are out there. It's just a matter of finding them and connecting with them. And yeah, sorry, you were gonna say something, Maria.
I have a question. I don't know if Bonnie also has a question, but
I had a
my
question
question
too.
is okay, so first of all, thank you everybody for sharing everything that you've shared, and Liz for everything that you shared. I appreciate it. I appreciate everything. For somebody like me who doesn't go on social media, who has a Facebook group, but I don't really go much on it. How can I actually start, even if it is TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, whatever? What do you do? Do you, hey, this is me, this is my work, how do you start?
That's a great question. Pick one or a couple,
Okay.
depending on how much time you have, and make an account and start sharing things. Also start and don't just share out, but also spend some time scrolling, spend some time, liking the things that you actually like or not, or scrolling past the things that you don't like, because the algorithms react to use. So the more active you are, the more your content gets promoted. Another hack that you can do is use hashtags. They're a little bit old-fashioned, but I still have found them working really well on Instagram in the last couple years. I am not as familiar with TikTok, but I am on there and I am trying to learn it more because it's fun. So hashtags would be, so like, let's say you posted a video of you making a painting. So in the description or whatever you're writing about it, you would use the hashtag symbol and then write painting, and the more general you can be with the hashtag, the better, because what this does is this tells the algorithms that run things to pull up your content when someone else is interested in this topic. And so if it's a really general topic like painting, which is really general, it's more likely to get pulled in. So what I do with hashtags a lot is I'll do some general ones and then I might do a couple specific ones, because the other thing is like, if you're doing something that's anyhow niche, like I also have interest in astrology, right? So sometimes my artwork and this interest cross over, and then I will hashtag that other niche interest because it's going to pull me into those folks who are also into that niche thing, right? It's not so niche anymore. I guess it's all over the place at this point, but you get my point. So whatever it is about your work that, take the general and the specific approach at the same time. Because what you'll find sometimes, you might stumble onto like a community of people that way that you might not have met otherwise.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, there's another TikTok hack that I've heard that you could tag, use a hashtag and write for you, just all one word, all lowercase. There's a thing on TikTok called your For You page, which is based on your, it's your feed based on your activity. Supposedly adding this to your post will pull you up in other people's For You pages. I'm not quite 100% sure that works though. But this is another place where if you're sharing a bunch of stuff and you feel like, oh, no one's seeing I'm not getting any traction, search the internet, say, you know, how do I get more followers? How do I get more likes on whatever platform? And you'll find tons and tons of support and hacks from people who spend way more time on social media than I do. So
Okay.
there's a lot of
Thank
resources
you.
out there. Just have to ask.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And how long did you say that the videos on TikTok need to be?
Well, it's prioritizing shorter content. I don't remember their specific limit. It's actually
Okay.
several minutes long. It might,
Okay.
I feel like I've watched up to like a 15-minute video on there before,
Oh, okay.
which is relatively long,
Long.
but
Okay.
Most of the
But you
ones
don't-
that get the most traction are about 30 seconds.
yeah,
Okay.
so it's prioritizing the short little,
Mhm.
and
That's how long
again,
people's attention spans are. right?
Sure.
again,
Thank
if you spend time on the app, you'll start to see what it's about, right? Because it's about figuring out how what you do can fit into this existing world that kind of has its own, you know, rules and weird customs and stuff.
Sure. And since I've never been on it, you know.
Right.
this.
Yeah, just go on. It's fun.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Bonnie, what was your question?
I'm going to say thank you. It's dinner time for me.
Mhm.
You're very welcome. Yeah, have some dinner. Bonnie, did you have a question or no?
I did. It's I realized in listening, and I appreciate everything that you said. I made a bunch of notes. I'm a note taker. I think I'm back more even beyond Maria in the beginning. I had some really like basic questions about like if you take a picture of your painting, do you frame it if you're going to sell it, or do you sell it, you know, unframed or matted? Do you how do you know what to charge for your work? And it was more basic things. You mentioned at one point I had a cousin who was a wonderful watercolorist, and he made his money by making copies of all of his, you know, making prints of the original. I guess I'm wondering, how do you determine whether you're going to do that? And maybe the Art League has already done a program like this, but I would be interested in those more basic things. But if I go to sell a picture, do I sell just the painting? Do I sell it matted? Do I sell it framed? That kind of a thing.
All good questions. So,
And you don't have to do it tonight. It's
I can give you some kernels to start with. In terms of whether or not you make prints and how you make prints, you know, every artist is different. So the physical work, the original painting is always going to be the most valuable thing. It's the one of a kind. There are no others, right?
Right.
Anytime you make a print of it, right, it immediately, that print is you should be charging less money for the print, usually
Right.
significantly less.
Yep.
And whether or not you print it yourself is kind of like, some artists really are either perfectionists or they like doing it, you know, get a fancy printer and some nice paper and print stuff at home. I have been thinking about making some prints myself, and I'm not interested in doing that part of it. And there are lots of services online. I believe Printerly is one. One of the lists had an on-demand print service as part of it. But this on-demand printing, I'm really a big fan of personally, again, because I'm not interested in making my own prints. I'd love to be able to put my image of my artwork up online and have somebody click on it and be like, oh, I want a print of that. And then I don't have to do anything but collect the money, right?
Right.
So there's lots of services, there's lots of websites that offer this now. I know lots of really, especially emerging artists that are taking this track, again, because really all you have to do is make the work, get a good digital image of it, and then upload it online and have a service that's doing the actual printing and shipping and all of that stuff for it. In terms of selling your original work, you don't have to sell work framed. People will always want it framed, right? So again, I think it's always a good idea to put yourself in your buyer, your collector's shoes, right? So if you like art and you want it on your walls, what do you need when you're shopping, and what do you want when you're shopping? You probably want something that you can just stick on your wall, right? You don't have to do a lot of work on the back end as a buyer. So that's why framing your work in advance is always a good idea. A lot of exhibitions, so as you're applying to shows, most of them will require that the work is ready to hang. So that usually means if it's a work on paper that it's framed. There are different situations about what ready to hang means depending on the work. But in general, it means that it's ready to go up on the wall and isn't just a loose piece of paper. Although there's, I feel like there's always like some caveat that I've experienced, but pricing your work, that was your other question. So price should be the perfect intersection between what the market will bear and what you feel it's worth, right? So you have to think about your costs going into your work, right? Because you don't really, it's never a good financial decision to let your work go for less than what you put into it. So that means any materials, that means a portion of whatever rent and utilities you spend on the place that you make it. That means your time, right? Now, all of these numbers can be kind of fuzzy, right? When I teach this to my undergraduate students, I give them a formula because, you know, they're young, they don't have a lot of life experience yet. And so they kind of need things a little bit more cut and dry, but you know, it's not quite the science that formula kind of makes it out to be, because one thing that can happen is you can say, well, I put all this money into it and I think it's the best thing I've ever done. And so I think it's this value. Well, the market could be over here and say, well, I hate to break it to you, but the value is actually, you know, several $100s less than what you were thinking. So it is always a sort of compromise of what are people willing to pay for this work? So how do you figure out the market? This goes back to that showing up thing. So going to exhibitions and seeing what things cost, going online and seeing what things cost, understanding the marketplace that buyer is in, and how your work compares to that marketplace. And that seeing ourselves in the marketplace is a really, it's not an easy thing to do, right? It's really hard to sort of see ourselves. And this is where galleries and dealers can really be of a benefit to us artists, is because they can look at our work and they can say, yeah, I think it's this value, right? Because they don't have that personal connection. They have no idea what went into it, but they do know who's buying and what they're buying and what they're paying. So I would imagine that there's probably some Art League resources for that kind of thing as well. But that's a little primer on pricing, which is always hard. Our students are like adorable. They just buy bill.
Thank you. I hear dinner calling.
Have a good
Also
night.
Business cards too.
Ooh, yes, business cards are great, especially if you're going to do that
You can hand
in-person
them out when
thing.
you go to places. Web addresses on the bottom, phone and mailing address. Make yourself accessible, like on one of your slides.
Yep,
I had an artist friend do that caricature of me on the
that's
beach.
great.
On the beach in Ocean City too.
Nice.
Very cool.
Bye-bye. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your expertise. I really do. Appreciate
Good.
it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So Liz, you're gonna make this available. You said people will get a copy of it and then we'll
Yeah,
put it on the YouTube channel.
sounds great. Yeah.
No, channel, and we'll send out, we're also gonna send an email out, like a mass email. Now that we have, this is the third part of the series of the business of art. We'll send out an email to all of our contacts that have all 3 courses on there, so people can go back and see the other 2 as well. And again, I want to thank the Worcester County Arts Council for their support in, funding this through a grant, so that we're able to bring this to our members and to the art community. So.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming. It was great to spend
Thank you.
an hour and a half with you. Take care.
Liz,
Bye-bye.
could you stay for a second?
Bye-bye.
I would like to ask you something.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.